As of 2022, it's been roughly 10 years since Blackmagic Design released the original Blackmagic Cinema Camera. Since then, every camera that followed has been a direct response to customer feedback, and there was a lot of feedback. From the Blackmagic Cinema Camera, to the Pocket Cinema Camera, to the Ursa range, and then the Pocket 4K, 6K, to finally the 6K Pro. It has been a real journey, and Blackmagic has now finally created a super camera that is a hybrid of many elements from their wide range of previous models. But is this camera the one to rule them all, or a bit of a Frankenstein's monster? My name is Corry Raymond. I'm a self-shooting director, producer, and cinematographer, and I've been shooting on this camera since its release. This is my ultimate review if you're thinking of hiring or buying this camera. So let's get started. To rent a Blackmagic 6K Pro on the Wedio website, the price ranges from roughly 60 to 80 euros for just the camera, and approximately 130 euros for a kit. This is dramatically more affordable than a camera hire company, where the camera body is roughly 180 euros per day. To buy the camera new, the price is roughly 2,500 euros, and to buy second hand is approximately 2,000 euros. It has a super 35mm sensor, the maximum resolution is 6K. It has an EF mount, dual native ISO at 400 and 3200, 13 stops of dynamic range, inbuilt ND filters, ProRes and RAW shooting capabilities, and optional accessories such as the EVF viewfinder. When you first look at the 6K Pro, you will notice it is a chunkier, heavier version of its older brother, the Pocket 6K. It has the identical sensor and shooting options as the 6K, and is generally the same camera except for a few key differences. But these differences make a huge impact. Firstly, starting with the inbuilt ND filters. To find inbuilt ND filters in a camera priced at 2,500K is astonishing. Unlike the Canon C100, the filters have an electronic motor that you simply tap to have the filter drop in front of the sensor. It comes with the standard 3 filters you would find on cameras such as the Canon C series or the Ursa Pro. Now, it goes without saying how much of an advantage built-in ND filters can give you, especially if you are a run-and-gun style shooter, or regularly shoot in a variety of different locations. This, paired with the dual native ISO, makes this camera the ultimate for on-the-fly shooting. You can basically film under any lighting situation and be able to adjust your settings fast. Secondly, its size. Its small body gives you the versatility to build the camera into whatever you need it to be. If you are shooting something low-key, perhaps in public, then stripping the camera back to just its body makes it very inconspicuous. Or, if you are more comfortable with larger production cameras, there are hundreds of accessories you can find to build this camera into a fully fledged production monster. The EVF is an optional purchase, but if you are building the camera into a production camera, then it's a must-buy. The tiltable screen is significantly better than the 6K and 4K's built-in screen, as it is brighter with both stronger colors and contrast, and the tilted screen comes in great handy when shooting handheld. Look, no camera is perfect, and this camera does have some disadvantages, but I believe all of these are workable, starting with this, base ISO. As I mentioned previously, the base ISO of this camera is 400 and 3200, but the one that you will probably use most often is 400. Most professional cinema cameras have a base ISO of 800. That includes the Arri Alexa, the Red Komodo, and the Blackmagic Ursus. The loss of one stop of light is not the end of the world, but will affect how you light setups. It also doesn't have any modern image stabilization features, such as IBIS, which you might expect to find in a DSLR. This is where the camera's design is confusing. It's shaped like a DSLR, but is more like a mini cinema camera. If you want features like image stabilization, stick around for later on in the video, where I show you a trick to achieve smooth images on the camera. Its body is also odd. If I put a lens on the camera and just let it sit, see what happens. I made a point in my introduction that this camera is the product of Blackmagic Design taking on board feedback from the last 10 years of designing cinema cameras. The Blackmagic 4K and 6K models look and feel like the finished article. This camera does look a bit like a Frankenstein's monster. With features added onto the original 6K body, it may have been better to design something that looked more like a Komodo. Like its long-winded name, the camera is a hybrid of many different types of camera. It sort of looks like a DSLR, but has the features of a professional production camera. But looks aside, it is powerful, and I wouldn't judge a book by its cover. As the name suggests, the Blackmagic 6K Pro is best suited to the pro shooter. If you're a beginner, operating this camera would be like pushing you into a lake. There are no auto features, the camera film log is the default way of shooting, and if you have never color graded before, taking your image to the next level will be frustrating. However, pair this with an advanced or pro shooter and this will be able to do all the tricks you're used to. From shooting in 120 frames per second to filming in RAW 6K, a beginner is going to struggle to unlock these features, but if you like the challenge, learning this camera from scratch will give you the skills to work with any camera. As the camera's title suggests, this camera is intended to be used for the big screen. I believe it can mimic an image that looks similar to the Arri Alexa or a Red camera with a super 35mm sensor. Its niche is its size and what it packs into that size. Wedding videographers will have a blast with this camera. It's lightweight and versatile, shooting with natural or available light, making it perfect for the run and gun nature of shooting weddings. The 6K Pro is also ideal for music videos for exactly the same reasons. The Super 35mm sensor is a standard format for feature films, and I am also confident in the 6K's ability to be used as an A-cam for low-budget indie features or short films. With these productions, money is always tight, and I genuinely believe with an expert cinematographer and color grade, an audience won't be able to tell the difference between a 6K Pro or an Arri Alexa. They wouldn't notice because frankly, they won't care. Audiences connect to stories, not cameras. Save your budget for lenses and lights. Is 6K overkill? I still read a lot of comments asking why you would want to shoot in 6K. Taking a tip from one of my favourite directors, David Fincher, shooting in 6K and editing in 4K gives you the extra pixels to reframe in post. That's an additional 33% of pixels to reframe. This is especially useful for shooting gimbal shots. You can shoot in 6K, edit in 4K, and then apply an image stabilization filter that automatically smooths the image by cropping in. By cropping into the image, you will be avoiding any loss of resolution. Blackmagic cameras have always had a reputation for having that classic celluloid film look. To achieve a celluloid film look, you want grain, a high dynamic range, smooth skin tones, and an image not too sharp. The 6K Pro offers all of this, which is why it looks cinematic. You could argue that the end image isn't massively sharp, but I don't think you want this anyway. You want an image to look soft towards the edges, but sharp in the center, which is the effect of Super 35mm. Quick tip, the 6K Pro benefits from exposure to the right instead of the left. Use the on-screen zebra to make sure you're not losing any highlights, but keep the camera slightly overexposed for best results. Let's go through the camera's settings together. The camera can shoot in 1080 and 4K ProRes. To shoot in 6K, you will need to change your camera settings to B-RAW. There, you will have a couple of compression settings. I suggest looking up the exact bit rates of each compression online before selecting which one to shoot on. Blackmagic recommends 12:1 for online only and 3:1 for feature movies. My favourite ones are 8:1 for online and 5:1 for high-end pieces. To access higher frame rates, such as 120, you need to go into the camera's sensor settings and crop it to 2K. You will only be using roughly half the sensor size, but you will be able to film in 120 frames per second. In the Settings tab, you can also select any overlays you want, whether or not you wish to output these to an external monitor via HDMI. I like to have the thirds up as well as the center crosshair and the frame guide. You can change the opacity of these in the settings. On the LUTs tab, you can select a couple of LUTs that convert the image to Rec 709 or something similar. Unless you tick a box in the settings, which I don't recommend you do, the LUTs will not affect the final image, only how you view it on the camera's viewfinder. You can also load your own LUTs, which you will see I have done. To go deeper into these settings to check before a rental, please watch my What to Prepare for When Shooting on This Camera on the Wedio website. Thank you guys for watching and best of luck with your shooting.